This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Today's episode of Two Bad Hombres is brought to you by The Athletic, premium coverage for passionate Detroit sports fans. Listeners of this podcast can save 30% off the first year of an annual subscription by going and visiting theathletic.com/DSP. If you heard the news earlier this week, they hired a bunch of brand new writers to cover the NFL, including Jay Glazer. I'm a huge fan of Jay Glazer. When you watch his coverage on Fox, he has a way of getting interviews. He has a way of calling out athletes and coaches, and he gets the good scoops. So definitely check out The Athletic. They're hiring great writers every single day. And now locally, they're going to cover Michigan and Michigan State football. So definitely become a subscriber and save 30% off by going and visiting theathletic.com/DSP.
I was trying to get it how I live. I want them dead presidents. I want to pull up, head spin, get it, get fly. I got 6 jobs, I don't get tired. I don't get tired. I don't get tired. Get it, get fly. I got 6 jobs.
And we are still not tired on this week's episode of Two Bad Hombres. I am your host, Vito and Geronimo, alongside my usual sidekick and broadcast partner in fun. That is the Doc from Doc and Jack, John Charles Macaroon. John, how are you doing?
Vito, welcome to the weekend. I'm sure you heard the news. Michigan finally announced earlier this week, Shea Patterson's the quarterback. He's the guy. All eyes on him. He's going to be talking to the media, making the rounds. And this week we got Brandon Justice, friend of the podcast. He'll break it all down. A guy that knows a lot about Michigan recruiting. He's definitely in the know. Big news regarding Michigan. And now September 1st is awaiting, and everything is going to be leading up to being as ready as possible for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. I can't wait for college football.
Shea Patterson being announced as a starter August 20th, so Monday of this past week. Worst kept secret in all of college sports and all of the nation, the world. I mean, all over the world, worst kept secret. Everybody knew he was going to be the starting quarterback come week 1, September 1 against Notre Dame at ND. Come on. Didn't you think the same thing? I think Brandon Justice thought the same thing. I think anybody, right? You don't have to be in the know to know that. Well, he is in the know, Brandon Justice. So of the Wolverine Lounge, he is our featured guest on this week's episode of Two Bad Hombres. So we'll talk all about that matchup for Michigan week 1 against Notre Dame in South Bend and some other U of M news and notes. But some other topics and maybe some bigger fish to fry, you could say, before we get into that conversation with Brandon in a little bit. First and foremost, kind of a big news thing that came out regarding the NBA and mental health. Kevin Love had penned an article earlier in the season, I believe for the Players Tribune, when the NBA season was still ongoing. And it was about him and his battles with mental health. So really this latest feature that was done by Jackie McMullen of ESPN.com brought up the point that NBA owners are looking to get access to NBA players' mental health to see where they stand with their mental health. Now you, Doc, as a psychologist by day, what do you think about that maybe becoming readily available to NBA owners that are seeking that kind of info about their players?
See, I'm curious as to what you read because I haven't read the article just yet, but most organizations, when they're committing big dollars to these athletes, they have a medical staff, so they should be testing these guys. And any team that has a decent psychologist should have somebody on staff with a PhD that could do an interview, that could do a series of testing in terms of IQ, the Rorschach test, things like that, personality testing, to also indicate if there's some issue with the player. But if owners want to be able to have access to somebody's mental health records from the past, that's not allowable. It will not happen. It won't go forward. By law, Vito, it's called the HIPAA law. I can't release any information to anybody regarding names, dates of service, what they're here for. I can't release anything without a signed consent. That's protected health information. So for owners to try and ask for that, I feel like it's stupid because all you got to do is really, just hire somebody that you trust, one staff person, and have them do a series of testing that can be part of the scouting department that will, give you a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And as well, if a player is struggling then he can go talk to the professional on staff, and maybe that's an avenue I'll go down one day when I'm a little bit older with more experience. I'll be a team psychologist, and I'll take credit for the success in the background. And when I read my first book about being a psychologist for a team, but for an owner to want this information, I understand it. Obviously, when you're making an investment, Vito, the investment is way higher than it was even 5 years ago. You're talking sometimes with these Supermax deals, $250 million plus. So if I'm dropping that much money, I want to make sure my guy is stable. But just hire a $40,000 a year psychologist to do a couple tests every single year, and that should just be part of the scouting department for any major organization in the world of sports. I think it's something that you will see, but I know what happens, and I've heard it before. Sometimes athletes don't like going to talking to mental health professionals, and sometimes an athlete might get turned off, especially if all the organizations aren't doing it. They'll be like, what? This organization put me through some weird testing where I looked at some blocks and I had to talk about this and that, and I was freaked out, and I'm not going there. But if it becomes uniform, I think it should be standard operating procedure. If you're an owner listening to this, hire a psychologist, a testing psychologist, to at least help with the scouting department to, at least have a sense of, hey, is this guy a winner? I definitely know 2 or 3 questions I'd ask right away in terms of, hey, is this guy a winner, or is this guy a follower? Is this guy a leader? Is this guy somebody that can avoid the pitfalls? With just 3 questions, I could ask, I would know if somebody was a loser or somebody had the opportunity to be a hard worker, with just philosophical scenarios about winning and losing, giving up, who you hang out with and your friends and stuff like that. You can get a glimpse into someone's thinking right then and there that I could put in a report and saying, you know what, this guy has the potential to be willing to support his friends and has some negativity in his life that could be detrimental to his career. So these owners coming out there and asking for protected health info is unbelievable, Vito. You shocked me when you said that to me.
Well, you know what? I think the team should employ psychologists, like you said, to evaluate these athletes. And more nowadays, it's more and more important because of the fact that they're making hundreds of millions of dollars in their contracts. Like Kevin Love just re-upped with the Cavaliers for long term. He is their franchise go-to player now. So you want to check these guys out, evaluate them, see if they're all there, in tune with the team, with the game, and able to operate on a game-to-game basis and give their full effort and not have all these mental issues, right? And to see if these guys can block out their mental issues, because everybody has some issues, right? Some ailments that aren't just physical, they go on in their daily lives at some point or another at least. So, and Kevin Love is a guy that's dealt with depression. He has dealt with anxiety. He had a panic attack at one point. So there are professional athletes out there making millions of dollars that deal with these same aches and pains that are mental related, are depression / anxiety related, at least one of the two. So it is ongoing even with athletes, and I loved how Kevin Love got out the message in that Players Tribune article that he penned, but also with Jackie Mack for ESPN.com, and then she came out with this news about some NBA, some is a key word here, some NBA owners wanting access to players' mental health records. That would be hard to go by to get it passed with the NBA Players Union, and I would think the Players Union, Doc, and the National Basketball Association would not let that fly.
Yeah, Vito, exactly. While you said that, there has been an official statement that's been made. NBA spokesman Mike Bass came out and said that is not the league's position. The NBA fully supports protecting the confidentiality of players' mental health information and accordingly committed to the Players Association that any mental health program we undertake would do so. It makes sense that league-wide that the policy would not be that, because no player would ever go seek treatment if they felt like some of their information would be released. So I'm definitely okay with the statement made. But for some of these owners, I also understand it too. You're giving away a bunch of money.
It's a big investment. It's because of that too. That's why these owners that have come out have said they wanted to get the access to these mental health records. You could see why. There's
no
at least a rhyme or reason
There
for
is
it.
zero room for error, especially if you give somebody $250 million and they have up and down moods and they can potentially be harmful to your organization. That can be a huge problem. Medical leaves, you're talking about not being available. You're also talking about when people get into destructive behaviors, you're talking about like staying out late, maybe being in some situations where to cope with it, you might start using drugs and alcohol. Some of these athletes might be involved in a series of terrible relationships and abusive type behaviors towards self or others that you just can't have. So I definitely understand why owners might want more information, but just seek it internally by having a great medical staff and by saying this: if you are an owner and you have a player and everything starts out good year 1, 2, 3, but year 4, 5, 6, maybe the death of a parent, something happens where the person needs help, you send them to at least a professional that you can also recommend that will at least, be willing to help out and things like that. But like I said, the biggest issue is trust. These players won't talk. They want to go to get their own help. They might want to go away from the organization. But if you're making big money, I would put a stipulation that if you are in need of mental health, we'll fully provide it, no cost to you, but you got to go to our doctors, period.
Well, these organizations are fearing that these players will go away from the team doctors, right, from the team's medical staff. It's like the Tom Brady, Alex Guerrero thing, right, having his personal trainer and going to him for all treatment instead of the team doctor of the New England Patriots. Bill Belichick didn't like that and didn't want other players to go to this personal trainer and doctor, whatever you want to call him, for Tom Brady. So you can see why these teams want to have their medical staff. If they're paying them all these dollars, right? It's a ludicrous amount of money. They want these players to go to their medical staff and get treatment from their medical staff.
Would you be in agreement that team owners should have their own staffs and make it a mandatory requirement to undergo some testing and undergo treatment if something does pop up? Do you agree with that? Or do you feel like a player should have a right to go elsewhere? Well, then the problem comes in that if he goes elsewhere, what's being said, what's being done, if the treatment's not done properly. I mean, there's a lot of psychologists out there that are not doing the best of jobs.
Well, right here, I'm looking at one now, exactly, right across from me in the studio.
Exactly. And you go, if you go to a bad psychologist and he comes back and the symptoms arise again and are really bad and are not getting better, you go, come on, I know you want to maybe go to an affordable place or private place or a place on the water or a place that your buddy's at too, but I need you to get well. I need you to be in control. I need you to be part of a program that's organized, that has some input from the team. And so maybe I would say that if you have a player that is getting treatment from somewhere else, that you make it a requirement that there is collaboration between the team psychologist and the person that you're going to see. You have to.
It's good to talk about things out in the open, right? To vent, to get things off your chest. And I think it helps everybody deal with their day-to-day issues. Everybody has some trials and tribulations they are going through, just maybe not as significant as others out there. So I think as long as you're talking to somebody, to a friend even, as simple as that, I think it's good to get your problems out there in the open with somebody that you're comfortable talking with. So I don't think it has to be a mandatory team-by-team thing. And I think it shouldn't be, because how about us as a podcast network, as an LLC, for you, your psychologist business here, right? Why would the people now, you're a psychologist, but other business, other companies, that you work for, such as me with Top Cat Sales, other entities that I do my freelance work for, my 7 or 8 companies that I do freelance work for, would I really want to receive mental health evaluations from each of them? No, it'd be ludicrous. I wouldn't want to receive a mental health evaluation from all of them. But it is good to get this out there in the mainstream conversation that people that deal with depression, it's a lot of people, and men deal with it as well. These superb athletes, big, manly dudes that are athletes and the best athletes in the world deal with these issues as well. And that's why I think Kevin Love did pen this piece when he did it, has talked to Jackie Mack now, and wanted to get the word out there about how he's a man in the NBA, a guy that's been a superstar that has dealt with depression, dealt with anxiety. So I love the message that he's spreading the word out there to the masses about it. But I also think that you shouldn't be mandatory from, team by team, that you go and talk to that team's psychologist, because I think you should be talking to somebody that you're comfortable talking with about your matters as well.
But most of these athletes are given an IQ test. They are given some sort of testing to see what their IQ is, what their basketball IQ is. You just add a couple components that will also add to their mental health. It should be available. I mean, that's part of an assessment. Any good scouting department, if they don't have it, they better start, because the money.
Have a psychologist on staff no matter what. And like when they're going through rookie player evaluations before the NBA draft, you evaluate the players that way.
Right. And what happens is nobody goes to see them because of the stigma and things like that.
Sure, and that's what I mean. People should be going, though, right?
Yes.
Or talking to somebody.
Exactly. No doubt about it, the stigma should be removed. And I understand that, but in the end, the most important thing is the player's wellness. But these players don't want that stigma to be used negatively against them, to go, oh, you talk to the guy about, feeling sad about your girlfriend breaking up with you, we're going to offer you less years and less money. That's the part that's the disconnect, is that there's fear that, oh, you think I'm dealing with mental health issues, you're going to cut my pay, you're not going to want me around. And so that's why, really, when these scouts go out there and ask questions, that's why they ask these unusual questions at the NFL Combine, is they try to get their reaction, like, is this guy easily triggered? Is this guy able to handle weird questions? Is this guy emotionally stable? these interview processes are psychological evaluations in some sense, Vito. General managers have to be part psychologists. They have to kind of sense that, okay, is this guy a worker? Is this guy somebody that's team-oriented? They ask these type of questions, but it's not done psychologically. So that's why it's important that general managers also, know these type of things too. That's why I think good general managers are also great psychologists, because you have to put together a bunch of talent that is going to work together as well. And so when you interview these players, you have to find out if a player is a good teammate, can work together with others, can take direction. So it's all being done, but the part specifically where, hey, if I need to talk to somebody about depression or something's going on in my life, who are they going to and how's that being handled? I think it's starting to be talked about more now with Kevin Love, DeMar DeRozan. I'm proud of them. There's been some great NFL athletes, NBA athletes that have also talked about it, and they're doing a bunch of great work as well to get the word out. But in the end, that's their biggest fear, is they don't want, and nobody wants it, they don't want their information to be used against them in a negative light. And that's the biggest fear, and that's something that probably will be discussed, is like, look, just because somebody has depression doesn't mean that they can't be part of a roster. It just makes it a little bit more difficult to kind of open up that line of communication and trust with these issues at hand.
Well, it's the stigmatization of talking about your feelings, a player talking about his or her feelings, and warming up to a person and talking about how they just broke up with their girlfriend or with their boyfriend. You get labeled as soft, right? That's the problem. There is a stigma that is attached to talking about your feelings, talking about what's going wrong in your life, in your day-to-day life. And when you open up about something that's gone erroneous with a loved one, with a significant other, then you're viewed perhaps as soft. And that label is attached to you, and you carry that for a long, long time, right? As you go from employer to employer. So players fear they won't get paid as handsomely in their next contract if they open up about their feelings, and then they get perhaps labeled as soft, and maybe that does lessen their next contract. But then I look at it in this way, the contrarian point of view. I would say, as a devil's advocate, for Kevin Love, he ended up getting paid handsomely. He came out, talked about his personal issues with his mental health problems and dealing with depression, dealing with anxiety. And guess what? By him opening up about his issues, it did not affect his pay at all, because he still got paid handsomely. So I believe ultimately, at the end of the day, if you're a good player, a good athlete, you're going to get paid by somebody. Somebody's going to pay you handsomely because they know you're so darn talented that you're worth paying. So when you're a really good athlete, guess what? You still end up getting paid. Now, for the lesser athlete, I can see where it would be more of an issue if you do end up opening up to somebody about your daily issues, about your feelings. I could see where you getting labeled as soft then does affect your pay, does affect your next contract. So I could see for those lesser athletes where they wouldn't want to open up and be talking to a psychologist. They wouldn't be as willing to talk to a psychologist openly about their day-to-day issues and their feelings, because for them, yeah, it might affect their next contract and how much they get paid in that next contract. But my belief is that for the superior athlete, the best of the best in their respective sport, it's not going to affect their pay because they're just so darn good. Somebody's going to have to pay them because they're going to want them on their roster because they're that big of an impact on a given roster, Doc.
Stay stable until you sign the check, baby. Sign the contract and then wild out. Sign that contract. Just make sure you hold it all together until that offer is made and signed.
People could hide it. Conceal all of it, not disclose it, fool the owner or the GM, and they get paid handsomely anyways. Then it comes out, well, they have all that money already with their contract that they have these issues. And guess what? As much as they're saying they're issues, everybody deals with them, so they're really not big issues. It's normal, right? It's a normal thing for athletes even, and that's why it's been great that Kevin Love has come out, has made this public to everybody out there that is now growing up, wants to be an NBA player themselves, and now they see a fellow NBA guy that's achieved a lot of success, made a lot of money, made multiple All-Star teams, has won an NBA championship. A guy like that has come out and admitted to the masses that he has dealt with these trials and tribulations as a result of mental health, and his mental health not always being in top-notch shape. So I think it really helps out, Doc, the younger people, right, that are growing up nowadays, see somebody else opening up that has made it to the NBA, has made it big, and now, well, they can believe that, hey, I can have these mental health issues, right, deal with depression, deal with anxiety, and it's not the end of my career.
All right, Vito, let's get Brandon Justice on the line. Great topic there. I'm interested to see how this progresses with more and more players advocating for quality mental health. It's very important, definitely to talk about. We'll see how these owners definitely take care of their athletes and what kind of policies they put in place. But most importantly, like always, if you are dealing with something, really most importantly is your mental health. Don't worry about the ramifications. Get yourself well. And even if it involves getting treatment, it's okay. It's not that big a deal. You just go and talk to a professional who will help you kind of adjust your thoughts and look at ways that are healthy to deal with life's ups and downs. But now we'll talk about the Michigan Wolverines. I can't wait to talk to Brandon Justice of the Wolverine Lounge, and he's going to break down the Shea Patterson news and what his expectations are for the 2018 Michigan Wolverines. Stay with us.
And Doc, one of our fine partners at the DSP Network, is once again Top Cat Sales. And specifically, Top Cat Team Sales is where you go for all your top-notch team and business apparel. As Top Cat, through John Wangler's leadership, the founder of Top Cat Sales, has developed a tradition of selling and distributing apparel with the highest quality and the very best service, with brands like Adidas. Get your team or business all in with Top Cat today by calling 248-246-1054. Once again, that number for Top Cat Sales is 248-246-1054. And remember to follow Top Cat Sales on Twitter at Team Top Cat. And now joining us on Two Bad Hombres for some fresh feedback on all things Michigan football is Brandon Justice of the Wolverine Lounge. Brandon, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Very good, man. Good to have you on. Long time no talk to. How are things going, by the way, at the Wolverine Lounge?
Everything's going pretty well. I think at this point in time, obviously we're focused on football season. It's a big one for Michigan fans, but it's also a pretty big one for us from a business standpoint, just because as our first season kind of embarks on us, this is definitely going to be the one that's most pivotal for us from a coverage standpoint. So really excited for the challenge and really excited to get after it.
So a big year for TWL, right? That's how you call it, the acronym for the Wolverine Lounge. And a big year for Michigan football going into year number 4 under the leadership of Jim Harbaugh. So what will he do? Well, one thing we know, he named Shea Patterson the starting quarterback, the junior transfer from Ole Miss. And that was a worst-kept secret in all of the nation, all of the world, in my opinion. What do you think should be the expectations for this guy going into week 1 on September 1 under the lights in South Bend versus Notre Dame?
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty tall order for a 20-year-old kid to walk into South Bend and be in the uniform for the first time. And he's had this, what feels like a year of not only hype, but also silence from a personal standpoint. I mean, he's only been available for one interview throughout his tenure at Michigan. And, with that being said, it's almost like he's a mystery man. So we know his highlights, we know his game. But we don't exactly know Shea Patterson, the person, too well yet, unless you're, personal friends with him. So, but what I do know about Shea Patterson is he is a kid that moves in silence, and he grinds in silence, and he performs in silence. So he does kind of have that flashy look, and he does have that flashy gear. That's kind of Johnny Manziel-esque. That's kind of been the easy comparison to make. But he does make all of those things happen on the field, and he doesn't really do a whole lot of talking off the field, as you've probably been able to tell through the past, 9 months of him not saying anything, whether it be on social media or in interviews or anything of that nature. He's kind of just done his thing and won the job outright. And for the first time, like you said, Jim Harbaugh's announced his quarterback publicly 2 weeks before game day. And that, if anything, that's a vote of confidence. Now, I know for a fact that last year there was a little bit of bad blood, that Jim Harbaugh never announced Wilton Speight as a starting quarterback, even though it was quite obvious that was going to be the case. But we still never got that guaranteed spot from Speight before the season started. Now, 2 weeks before the game, we already know that it's going to be Shea Patterson. And sure, like you said, it was the worst kept secret. But nonetheless, for it to be official, and from the horse's mouth of Jim Harbaugh, means a lot. And I think has a pretty large, it means a lot for Jim Harbaugh to do that, because he hasn't done it before at Michigan, is the best way to put it.
So do you think Harbaugh realized that quarterback secrecy in the past didn't work out for him? And just also, you kind of already hit on it, but why did Harbaugh make this decision on August 20th, being 2 weeks out from that game against Notre Dame?
You know what? I think it's because the quarterback that he has right now in Shea Patterson is a better quarterback than he's had in his, not only at Michigan, but, take away Andrew Luck, probably ever, right? Andrew Luck removed from that conversation. Now, does Shea Patterson have that kind of upside? Sure, he's got a pretty large upside. I wouldn't compare someone's upside to Andrew Luck just yet. That's a scary upside, a scary high upside. But nonetheless, Shea Patterson is his most talented quarterback since Luck at Stanford, and he's most definitely his most talented at Michigan. And I think Harbaugh, in my a little bit of opinion, a little bit of what I've heard from sources, Shea Patterson's killing it. I mean, he's having an absolutely phenomenal camp. He's been phenomenal since at Michigan. He hasn't caused any problems. He hasn't been, anything besides a quarterback and a leader in the locker room, on the field, and his performance is following all of that up. He is living up to the hype so far in camp would be the best way for me to put it. And this August 20th announcement, this premature announcement from Harbaugh that's so outside of the box for a Jim Harbaugh team is the only thing that I think Michigan fans should take away from it is it's a really, really good thing. There's no way it's bad. It's just good because Shea Patterson is the quarterback that made Harbaugh say, you know what, I'm just going to tell everyone. He broke what was seemingly for so long the Harbaugh silence, the oh-so-famous Harbaugh silence, the one that was, critically everybody over the country so critical of it, right? That he would never announce it, even though it was always thought to be obvious. And now that's over with because, in my opinion, it's because the quarterback was good enough to break the silence.
So the announcement was made a little bit less than 2 weeks out from the game. So not exactly 2 weeks, but very close to that kickoff for the season. Game number 1, week 1 in South Bend at Notre Dame. What a big game under the bright lights in South Bend for the U of M Wolverines this season. And it's Brandon Justice of the Wolverine Lounge along with us on Two Bad Hombres this week. And a lot of attention has been given already to Shea Patterson. A lot of people have hyped him up, and local and national media outlets alike, such as yourself, Brandon. I can really tell that you're all on board with Shea Patterson being under center come week 1. Now, should we start jumping on the bandwagon regarding Shea being a Heisman candidate? Because that has been expressed by some, at least, out there.
Yeah, you know what? It's because he's such a polarizing player on the field, and he's got the frame, he's got the style, and he's in the right time of football for a spread quarterback like himself to put himself in the race for the Heisman. Right. And going into this year, we thought, okay, there's one thing that's going to hold back Shea Patterson from a Heisman race, and that's if Harbaugh's offense doesn't change around him. Right. If you throw Shea Patterson under center 80% of the time, he's not going to be very successful. Now, don't get me wrong, they will be under center, and he can succeed under center, but his primary skill set plays well with shotgun. And that's what you're going to see a lot more of this year. And I think that's why his Heisman campaign is getting that extra push, because the ones in the know that Michigan's personnel and its playbook has not only expanded but it's simplified, and that's around Shea Patterson. It's seen the biggest talent on the offense is its quarterback. Its success weighs on its quarterback, whether it was Shea Patterson or not. But it was lucky enough to get the best free agent in college football this year, and they're going to build around it. Now, the Heisman push comes from his statistics in just the 7 games that he played last year, when he put up more yards total than Michigan's quarterbacks did combined in 13 games, including passing for 8 more touchdowns total that Michigan's quarterbacks combined for, again, in 13 games compared to just his 7. So there is a reason to be on the hype train. I mean, don't get me wrong, Michigan's quarterback stats, not one to compare to and be proud of, considering it was the lowest output since Michigan ran the option offense in 1975. But nonetheless, the kid has talent. He's got numbers. He's not coming in as a true freshman. We're not relying on his high school tape. He's faced the SEC. He threw for over 350 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions, a 66% completion rate against Auburn, who we know had a stout defense, right? So he has those numbers and he has those highlights to back it up against those SEC teams, and that's why this Heisman push is real. Am I naming him the favorite? By no means. But is he top 5, top 6, top 7? He's got to be somewhere in the conversation. If I had to put him somewhere, probably top 8, just because we really haven't seen him, and he is technically coming off an injury, even though it was a very minor one. But after that first game against Notre Dame, it's very possible that game, we remove from it and Shea Patterson inserts himself into that conversation if he has a big game. And I'll tell you what, from what I've heard and from what I could see with this offense's, its changes in the playbook, that Notre Dame game is supposed to be the Shea Patterson coming out party. It's pretty much just up to him and the offensive line if it's going to execute that.
So his first time under center for Michigan then. How does he fare against ND? You're expecting big stuff, it sounds like, Brandon. So give me a stat line. Give me a prediction right now. You're on Two Bad Hombres.
Well, here's the thing. A lot of people are not really talking about Notre Dame's defense, right? They return the most production in the entire country. Not a lot of people know that. And while they do have quite the good defense, like I said, in returning production, they haven't really seen this Michigan playbook. They haven't been able to prepare for it because there's no film on it. Michigan's new offense, Michigan's new playbook. It's not, like I said, not completely revamped. It's just got a modern spin on it. And that's why I like Michigan in this game. But the X factor is always going to be what for Michigan? It's defense. It returns nearly in every starter besides Mo Hurst and Mike McCray, 9 of 11 starters. Who is most likely to replace McCray at the linebacker position at will is Josh Ross, who I think is better athletically, both faster and stronger than McCray. Maybe not as smart and certainly not as much of a leader just yet, but he's a good replacement. And then you got Aubrey Solomon replacing Maurice Hurst. And if you didn't know, Aubrey Solomon was the number 2 defensive tackle in the country coming out of high school, which Michigan beat Alabama for. So you got 2 really good plug-and-play kids replacing the 2 they lost before. Take on that Michigan defense and put it against what could be a true freshman quarterback because Notre Dame still doesn't know its quarterback. And tell me what, a year ago, thinking about the Michigan-Notre Dame game, who would have thought that Notre Dame would be the team that didn't name its starting quarterback before the game came, right? So all of that taken into account, the fact that Notre Dame lost its starting running back, its quarterback problems, it lost Quentin Nelson and Ronnie Stanley on the offensive line, and it lost to I can't say his name, but St. Brown, the receiver. Against Michigan's defense, that's the tail of the tape right there. I like Michigan. I think it will be close until about the third quarter. I like Michigan to win by 13. Will it be Shea Patterson's coming out party? I don't think it happens right away. I do like Notre Dame's defense. So if I had to make a prediction right now, which technically this is my first prediction, so this is a DSP exclusive, I guess.
Oh, beautiful. Breaking news here. Love it. Love it, Brandon.
I would take Michigan 28-13.
So really good luck to Brandon Wimbush or whoever is starting, right, for Notre Dame in that game. I guess you have to say that, don't you? Because good luck against that Michigan D. Like you said, all those playmakers, that D-line, ferocious Michigan D. It's going to be very strong, very potent again this season.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at a quarterback in Brandon Wimbush that's really good on his feet. And he does have good arm strength, but there's a lot of things that he lacks, and it's the typical things that have been lacking with Brian Kelly and his quarterbacks at Notre Dame. Can't make the accurate throws, don't hit the right check down sometimes, try to do too much with the deep ball, and commit a lot of turnovers. And that's typically what's been the narrative for Brian Kelly quarterbacks at Notre Dame. So take that into account against Michigan's passing defense that returns all 4 of its corners, including the 2 in David Long and Lavert Hill that combined for the lowest passer rating against in the country last year, and a defensive line that's got Rashawn Gary and Chase Winovich, 2 NFL draft picks. And you got a recipe for what could be a big success for Michigan and not so much for Notre Dame.
Rashawn might mess up Wimbush there. There might be some sacks there, and he only completed 49.5 of his passes last year as a junior for Notre Dame. Brandon Wimbush, that is. So I would think Wimbush or whomever starts isn't going to highly succeed against that Michigan D on September 1.
You know what? That would be a bet that you should probably take.
I think so. I think I should too. And Brandon, when you look at U of M, where it's been ranked in the AP preseason poll, at number 14, MSU at number 11, do you think it was warranted where those 2 teams were slotted by the AP preseason poll?
Yeah, you know what? I love that you asked that because I did write a story about this yesterday when the polls dropped. And another thing that we tried doing at TWL is just kind of changing things up and taking the usual story and just kind of putting our own twist on it. And the usual AP poll drops with just the ranking, and we dropped it with the ranking and our own analysis on it. And this was basically how I put it. Michigan is at 14. Michigan is right where it needs to be. It's not high enough to where there's a target on its back and it needs to prove itself and, live up to the hype. And it's not low enough to where it has to scratch and crawl its way into a top 10 ranking. It's right there. It's on the brink of, they beat Notre Dame. They beat, they have a couple early matchups, one being with Wisconsin in week 6. They win those 2 games. They could find themselves in the top 4 if they're undefeated, just like that. They don't have to scratch and crawl. So at 14, they don't have a target on their back, and they're not far away from the top 10. And Michigan State at 11, of course, they're the most experienced team in the country with a coach that, has proven himself over and over again to be able to win the tough games on the tough whether it be night games on the road, they have a quarterback who is criminally underrated nationally in Brian Lewerke, and they return a pretty, Michigan State's known for always having a good pass defense and a good defense in general. So returning the most experienced one with what he did last year with an inexperienced one is pretty impressive. So I think 11 is appropriate for State, but you know what? Personally, I would have had them at 10th. I didn't like how high Washington was. I would have had Washington 11th and Michigan State 10th. That's just me. But yeah, I think they're appropriately ranked at 14 and 11. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, especially for Michigan State. Very deserving of that spot.
And MSU still gets no love, still no respect. I mean, Mark D'Antonio still gets called Mark D'Antoni. I mean, Colin Cowherd just did it the other day, right? On Speak for Yourself, a show that he's leaving soon. Maybe he should be because he can't get the guy's name right when he has 100 victories at MSU in his tenure at Michigan State. Won 10 games last year, won that Holiday Bowl, and they bounced back from that 3-9 campaign to win 10 games. This guy deserves a ton of respect. And then you have Brian Lewerke, a great passer in the Big Ten, in the nation, in college football as a whole. And it seems like Michigan State, Sparty as a whole, never gets enough respect. And I think they were slotted properly there at number 11. Now with you, Brandon, we got to talk more Michigan-related news and notes. And one of the big ones that just came out was Chris Webber is going to make his grand return to Michigan November 3rd against Penn State at Michigan Stadium. I mean, he really hasn't been around campus since 93 when he left for the NBA, was then banned for 10 years. That expired in 03. So this guy, a member of the Fab Five, one of the legendary Michigan basketball players in U of M history, will make his grand return November 3rd. Why do you think he felt it was the right time for him to return to Michigan?
And you know what? Jim Harbaugh had a lot to do with that. He really pushed for Webber to somehow make that return. Do I think it's inappropriate that his return is for a football game and not a basketball game? Yeah, it's a little interesting, but they're putting him on the biggest stage, right? They're putting him in front of 114,000. They're not putting him in front of what's the 3/4 full Chrysler Arena. I mean, sure, if you advertise for Chris Webber, they could probably sell out Chrysler early in the season, but I think it's the right time. I think you put it well. It's the timing. At this point, at this juncture, Webber wants to make his way back, and those in the program want him to make his way back. That was never the case before, and it is now. And you know what? It's appropriate, and it's good for not only the program, not only the basketball program, but the fan base. I think the fan base has always wanted this. You don't want bad blood between any former player and the program, but you really don't want bad blood between arguably the most polarizing basketball player that the program's ever had, maybe sans Jalen Rose, who those two have a pretty interesting standing right now as it is.
Yeah.
But it's good, and it's for the better. The fans have, from what I've seen, been very well received about it, and it's good. Will we ever find out the truth behind the whole situation? You know what? Who cares? It's happened. It's in the past. It's time to move on. Those who made the mistakes served the mistakes. The ban was obviously the ultimate penalty served for that. So I think at this juncture, it's time to move on. It is time to bring back Chris Webber, and I think it's going to be huge for the program and huge for the fan base.
Yeah, it's a time to move on from all of that, the Ed Martin scandal. And millennials like you and I mean, we don't even care. We don't even know about that scandal that happened. We looked it up.
Right.
We found out stuff that we looked up, but that's the only reason why we know anything about that.
Fun fact, my dad played with Chris Webber. So
did he really? C. Webb, the legendary C. Webb. Now,
a little fun fact for you.
Very fun fact to leave us with. And the only thing is I would say to comment once again on that is why not return for a basketball game at Chrysler Center, right? Like you were kind of saying.
Right.
For C. Webb, a member of the basketball team, it was almost a little bit of a disgrace to him that he can't return for that. But it's on C. Webb, too. It's on both entities, I guess you could say. And I think it's been even on C. Webb more in the past because he hasn't been willing to be around when Michigan's made these great tournament runs, too, with the other members of the Fab Five.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know what? Don't count it out, though. Just because he is going to this football game doesn't mean that he won't at some point make his way to Chrysler during the season. That's purely a hunch. I've got nothing on that for you, but
no news to break here on that.
But don't be surprised. Because for him to put himself out there in the middle of the field as the honorary cap means that he's probably willing to put himself out there in front of Chrysler Arena too, in my opinion. So we'll see what happens. I think every fan wants him to make his return to the basketball arena too, even more so than just the football game. But right now, I think fans are basically taking what they can get out of C-Webb, and that's the Penn State game, and I'm sure it'll be electric. Will it be as electric as when Tom Brady came back or Woodson came back? No, probably not. But it will be a similar kind of feel in that stadium that man, that polarizing figure that hasn't been there in so long, is finally back. It won't be a celebrating type feeling as hard as it was for Brady and Woodson, in my opinion, just because it is a football game, but it will be a different kind of feel in that it will just feel like the reunion is happening right in front of all of us, would be the best way to put it. So maybe it'll be heartwarming. We'll see.
We'll see, definitely. Brandon Justice. And, something to look forward to is C-Webb and Michigan interconnected for the first time in a very long time and way too long. And guess what, Brandon? It's been way too long since we last talked before this chat here on Two Bad Hombres this week. Great stuff from you. Best of luck to you with the Wolverine Lounge moving forward. And I'll probably see you during the regular season at a game at the Big House.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I always love to.
And, Doc, that was Brandon Justice of the Wolverine Lounge, a man that used to do a podcast on our airwaves at the DSP Network, has gone on to have this successful run now with the Wolverine Lounge, breaking news left and right. He's been featured on ESPN on The Bottom Line, getting credit for some news that he broke. So a big credit to what he has done working his way up as a newsbreaker of Michigan, and really all Michigan athletics, Doc.
No doubt about it. He's a Michigan influencer. Follow him at Brandon B. Justice for Michigan News and Notes, as well as follow Michigan Podcast on Twitter. Steve Dace does a weekly Michigan podcast for the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. It airs every single Tuesday. He has great guests, and he's got a lot of insight, a lot of history regarding the Michigan football program. And Brandon brought up a lot of great points regarding Shea Patterson. It is interesting, though. A lot of people are talking about Shea Patterson, but Shea just wants to focus on football, and he's going to talk to the media collectively, but there's not going to be a lot of opportunity to get to know him in-depthly at this point in time as he wants to focus on football. But I obviously believe what Brandon said. It's a good choice to name him the starting quarterback. I believe he was recruited to be the number one guy, and unless a catastrophe happened, he was always going to be named the number one guy.
So Shea's been a guy that's been more focused on football than off-the-field stuff in the past. He has talked to the media a little bit, but I don't know anything about him. I'll tell you the truth. I don't care what you say if he's talked to somebody. At large, I don't think fans really know who he is. So
exactly.
We'll see, but it's more important what he does on the football field. Who cares how he is off the football field if he gets it done on the football field, right? That's
100%,
when it comes down to it.
And he's been overhyped as it is.
Super hyped. And you could argue, you just said overhyped. You just said it yourself. You could argue he has been overhyped because he hasn't done anything yet. Right? At Michigan, he hasn't. At Ole Miss, he did a little bit. 17 touchdowns, 9 INTs last season as a sophomore. Now as a junior, Michigan, man, and the Michigan faithful are expecting a lot from Shea Patterson. Now, another thing that we do know about, well, besides for Michigan on the football field, something away from the field and really from another sport that I discussed with Brandon is C-Webb coming back to Michigan for the first time in a very long time, as he's almost completely avoided everything on campus at U of M since 1993 when he went on to the NBA. What are your thoughts? I have to get your thoughts too, Doc, really quick here. What are your thoughts on C-Webb making this return to Michigan at Michigan Stadium November 3rd against Penn State?
It's been a while for Chris Webber. I understand that Jim Harbaugh's wanted to reach out and have Chris Webber part of that program, and maybe this is just a way to ease into it, obviously by attending a football game and not a basketball game. But the bigger issue and the bigger problem that's probably causing the issue with him being part of a basketball situation is it seems like there's an issue between him and Jalen Rose.
As Brandon mentioned, that is true, I think.
And some fences have to be mended before I think that whole thing takes place where all five guys come together and do some things because each of them has tended to talk about each other in different projects, and they've kind of had a little bit of a beef going on through the media, through ESPN, and both parties, I think, at this point in time are a little bit apart. There's a rift, and so I think that might prevent a reunification, at this point in time.
So another thing that we know about, moving on from everything Michigan that we discussed, Hooters has an issue on its hand, doesn't it? And it's because of millennials. I talked about Brandon about millennials, how we don't really know everything about the Ed Martin scandal. Well, now this, and a totally different sphere of conversation, we don't know why Hooters totally is struggling, but they're kind of blaming it on millennials, saying we don't like boobs.
Well,
what do you think about that, Doc?
Yeah, it's a fantastic final topic to think about, why a restaurant like that isn't as successful. At the same time, it's not only millennials, it's also the fact that we've now become a little bit more progressive of a society, and restaurant food being served by scantily clad women is just not as popular as it used to be. Now, there's a niche market for it, but more and more women find that to be demeaning. It's harder to get women to do that job, and more people view it as something that's negative than it is positive. And to be honest with you, there are better places for wings at a better price across the country. And I think that if you were to tell me when's the last time I ate at Hooters, it's been over 5 years. I think that for me, there's been situations where I've been invited to parties to go to Hooters, but I just haven't felt the need to go. There's nothing on the menu that's just outstanding that I got to go get it. And by and large now, I'm just not that big of a chicken wing eater at this point in time in my life. I've eaten so many of them that, unless something...
Are you trying to get off the wings? You're saying?
I'm trying to get off the wings. And I would say if they want to go further, they have to be more scantily clad to draw more people, because they have covered up a little bit.
They have. In Twin Peaks, a company like that has launched all these restaurants locally, too, around town. And guess what? They're stealing business from Hooters, and Hooters are going out of business.
See?
And one on 16 Mile on Big Beaver, that one just went out of business, not too far from here in Sterling Heights.
Exactly.
So you see them going out of business left and right now, too.
So do you see Hooters being around in the next 5 years?
I think to a lesser extent, and I think it will actually come down to maybe them even becoming more out there with their attire, showing more skin. Unfortunately, that was their market that they entertained, and they attracted guys into their restaurants because of that for many, many years. But now there's other options that go more to town with it, that their women are scantily clad, with their attire, and even more than Hooters. And they're people that worked in the restaurants for Hooters. So these girls at Twin Peaks, they're wearing attire that is more of showing skin. I mean, it really is.
I've never been to Twin Peaks yet. I still haven't been.
Well, the women are scantily clad. With their attire, it is that kind of attire.
Yeah, I've been to Tilted Kilt, and while it's flattering, it's just, I understand most women, it's just not the best of look for women.
Well, it's not progressive. You said
it. Progressive.
That's the term they use nowadays to throw out, because mainstream people are using that term and are trying to become more progressive, right? Yeah. And just appropriate and I guess considerate of women's needs, and that they don't want to wear these shirts that are, showing off their breasts. I mean, they don't want to have their boobs exposed like that. And I don't blame them for thinking that way. I don't think I would want my boobs exposed too if I had them. I have these tiny boobs as a man, but seriously, the woman, I don't think I would want them just clearly exposed to all these guys that are just gawking at you, right?
All right, Vito. Good podcast. Enjoyed the conversation. It'll be interesting to see if Hooters does become a little bit more progressive, or if they change up the menu, if they do more things to attract millennials. It'd have to involve social media, more campaigns, a little bit more to attract the attention of you millennials, because you guys need a lot. It takes a lot to keep your guys' attention.
We expect a lot, don't we? Exactly. We need more than wings and more than the women. More food options, too, at Hooters maybe would help out, Doc.
Real quick, they call you to a meeting and they say, Vito, we got a focus group. Give us 1 or 2 ideas to fix our problem. How do we attract millennials to Hooters?
We want to see the butts, not the boobs.
Gotcha.
There we go. I think a lot of guys actually feel that way. Now, I would say, honestly, food options. More diverse food options for me.
All right, Vito. Good stuff. Follow Vito on Twitter at Vito Jerome. Follow the show at 2 Bad Hombres. If you've agreed, disagreed with anything that you've heard, feel free, message anytime the network at Detroit Podcast. We read everything. We greatly appreciate all your support. Check out the website, DetroitSportsPodcast.com, and you can find out about all the happenings here on the network. We would not have been able to grow to the level of success that we had without your support. And we were going to talk about the event that we had, DSP Appreciation Day, but we'll table it till next week because of the fact that we had such great talk this week. But we will definitely recap DSP Appreciation Day that took place at Jimmy John's Field next week. So stay tuned to the next episode of 2 Bad Hombres.
Adios.